Welcome to my YouTube channel. So in our last tutorial, we checked how to identify duplicate records from a table. So you can just go through this link where we have explained that how to identify duplicate records from a table using group by. Okay, and in this tutorial, we're going to talk about once we have identified those duplicate records, we have to remove those duplicate records from database permanently or from a table permanently. So this is not something we are just fetching data through distinct clause. The distinct clause is going to give you unique records, but it will not remove those records from your database. Okay, so in this tutorial, we're going to talk about how to remove those duplicate records from a table or from database permanently. So there are different ways through which we can achieve this. So the first method is using row ID with group by clause. Second method is using row ID with self join. Third method is using analytical function, which is row underscore number. And fourth method is also using analytical functions using rank and dense rank. So we'll talk about each of them one by one. So first of all, what is row ID? So we have already discussed about row ID in our one of previous session. So I'll just paste the link here. If you want to know more about what is row ID and how this row ID gets changed, how this row ID gets inserted into your table, into your database. So this is the link. In this tutorial, I have already discussed that what is the row num and what is the difference between those two topics, the row num and row ID. So I can just go through this link to know about how this row ID gets changed and how this row ID gets inserted into our table or into our database. So this is something is a permanent. What is row ID? So row ID is something that is a permanent address of a row that we have inserted into our table. So whenever we insert any record into a table, its corresponding row ID also gets generated automatically by the Oracle. So that will be the physical address of that particular row. And the important thing is this row ID will be different for different rows. So even if our row is duplicated in a table, so for example, if we have duplicate records in a table, so that row ID will be different. So row ID will not be same. So if we have suppose we have that ID, name and salary columns in my table, and ID, name and salary is same for 2-3 records. So for these 3 records, the row ID will be different. And this row ID will be generated in ascending order. So the record which is inserted at the end for this piece of record will have the maximum row ID. So row ID will be generated in ascending order for combination of fields. And the record inserted at the end will have the maximum row ID. So let's move into our first method, which is using row ID with group by. So in this we'll be taking an example of a table where we have already inserted duplicate records that we talked in our previous session as well, where we checked at how to identify duplicate records in that table. So let's check this practically, how method 1 works and how we remove duplicate records from a database permanently using row ID with group by option. So we'll take an example of this table to test. So let me just show you that what we have in this table. So I've ordered it by the ID column in ascending order. So as you can see that for 101 ID we have 2 records inserted into this table. For 102 we have 2 records. For 103 again we have 2 records. For 104 we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 records. And for 105 we have 1, 2, 3, 4 records, and for 106 we have only one record. So this is something we have a valid record, the last record. But starting from the first, that is our ID 101, this is the first record inserted, right? So if we just fetch row ID also in this result set, so ID name comma salary. So this query is going to give me ID name salary and its corresponding row ID that we have physically stored in the database. So I have just ordered it by ID and row ID column. Okay, so if you see this, the first record for 101 ID is having this row ID and the second record is having this row ID. So this row ID will be stored in ascending order as we have already discussed. So that means, so this will be our this will be having maximum row ID for this particular ID. So for this particular combination of columns, we have two row ID inserted. The second one is the maximum row ID. In the same way, if you talk about the 104, so for 104 we have 1, 2, 3, 4 records. So this is the first record we have inserted into this table, and this is the row ID, the first generated for this combination. This is the second, third, and fourth. And the fourth one will be the maximum row ID for this combination of record. When I say combination of record, that means the combination of ID, name, and salary. That is what duplicated in this table. And this is the maximum. So just think about a way that if you can identify the maximum row ID for this combination, for each combination of ID, name, and salary, if you can identify the maximum row ID. Okay, so how to do that? Select ID, name, salary, comma max row ID. From DupTest and group by all these three columns. So this is something is going to give me the maximum row ID for this combination. Let's try to execute this. So if you see, we have a maximum row ID for 101 is this, for 104 is this. Let's just try to copy this and then we'll compare it with the previous result set. Let's go to the first query result. So as we talked about that for 101, we have two row ID. The first one is the first row ID that is inserted. The second one is the second row ID, the maximum row ID. Okay, so if we talk about the output of this query, for 101 we have this row ID. So if you see, this is the maximum. In the similar way, we can compare the for 102 we have this one. So if you see in this result set, we have here it's a maximum row ID. For 104, this is the row ID. For 104, this is the row ID. Okay, so we have this result set. So if we can just build a query to keep only those records, so wherever for this particular combination, for this column combination ID, name, and salary, wherever we have maximum row ID, just keep those records and remove rest of the records. In that way we'll get the distinct records in this table, but those records will be deleted permanently from the database. So wherever row ID is this, keep those records and remove rest of the records. So what will be our query? Delete from my table name DupTest where row ID, so we have to exclude those records and remove rest of the records, where row ID not in. So in this case we need only the maximum row ID, so I will not be selecting rest of the columns. So the complete query without, so because we have ID column also, so we can just keep ID column. So this is going to give me the maximum row ID. So this particular query is going to give me this maximum row ID for each of the combination of records you've inserted into the database. So this query is going to keep those records and will remove rest of the row IDs from the database. Okay, so let's just try to execute this. So as you can see, 9 rows deleted from the table. Now, if we select record from this table, now we'll be selecting without distinct keyword. So that's what our purpose, to get distinct records from a database, or to remove those records from the database permanently. So let's just try to select everything from the table. So our expectation is we'll not be having any duplicate records in this table now. So as you can see, we have only, let me just order it by ID column. We'll select the row ID as well. ID name, salary, row ID. Okay, so we have only 6 records now. So we have permanently removed those records from the database, and we have kept only those records, the records which are having the maximum row ID in the table. Okay, so this method is using row ID with group by clause. So in method 1, first of all, we need to identify the maximum row ID for the combination of columns we have inserted into the database. Then we need to keep those maximum row ID for that combination, and we'll have to remove the rest of the records. And then we can check the result set in our database that we have successfully removed all the duplicate records from the table, and we have kept only the record which is having maximum row ID for that combination. Okay, so in our next tutorial we will talk about the method 2, which is using row ID with self join, and rest of the methods as well. So thanks for watching my tutorial, and like, share and subscribe to get more updates.